I'm Natalie, 29, and I never thought my own sister would sabotage my career. Amanda got me fired from my dream job by altering my designs before a crucial presentation. When I finally rebuilt my life and found success, my family suddenly reappeared, not to apologize, but with hands outstretched, demanding money. They had no idea what I had planned instead. The journey from betrayal to standing my ground changed everything between us. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear how I turned family betrayal into an unexpected lesson about boundaries. Growing up in Lansing, Michigan, I was the middle child sandwiched between my older sister Amanda and my younger brother Ethan. Our parents, Richard and Dorothy Williams, provided a stable middle-class life, but there was always an undercurrent I couldn't quite name until I was older. Amanda, 3 years my senior, was the golden child, the one whose achievements were celebrated with parties while mine earned brief nods. Whether it was her straight A's or winning the school science fair, my parents beamed with pride that seemed to dim whenever it was my turn in the spotlight. I discovered my passion for art and design early, filling sketchbooks with logos and illustrations by age 12. When I won a statewide design competition in 8th grade, my mother's first response was, "That's nice, but Amanda just got accepted into the National Honor Society." That evening, we went out to celebrate Amanda's achievement, not mine. It was a pattern I grew accustomed to, though it never stopped stinging. Amanda wasn't cruel when we were young, just competitive in a way that seemed to intensify whenever I received any attention. If I got new clothes, she suddenly needed a wardrobe update. When I was praised for my artwork, she would start a new hobby that captured our parents' interest. The subtle competition became our normal, and I learned to downplay my achievements around her. Ethan, 2 years younger than me, was the family musician. He played guitar beautifully but struggled academically. Our parents viewed his artistic interests as a phase, while considering my design aspirations impractical. The family dynamic was clear. Amanda was the star, Ethan was the challenge, and I was just there. By the time college applications rolled around, the divide deepened further. Amanda had been accepted to the University of Michigan's business program with a partial scholarship. My parents contributed the remainder of her tuition, bought her a car, and set her up in an apartment near campus. They spoke of the investment as obvious. Amanda was going places. When I was accepted to Columbia College Chicago for graphic design, my parents' response was tepid at best. "Art school is expensive for what you get," my father said during dinner. "Amanda's degree will actually lead to a career." The message was clear. I would largely be on my own. I cobbled together small scholarships, student loans, and worked 20 hours a week at a campus coffee shop plus weekend shifts at a print shop downtown. Those college years taught me self-reliance but widened the gap between my family and me. During holiday breaks, conversation revolved around Amanda's business classes and internship prospects. My design projects were met with polite but disinterested nods. "That's creative," my mother would say, the word sounding more like a dismissal than praise. Midway through college, Ethan dropped out of his community college to join a band, causing the first major family crisis I could remember. My parents were devastated, directing all their energy toward fixing his decision. During this time, Amanda positioned herself as the voice of reason, the responsible daughter, further cementing her status while I remained peripheral to the family drama. Despite the financial struggles and family dynamics, I thrived creatively in Chicago. My professors recognized my talent, and I began building a portfolio that garnered attention at student showcases. By senior year, I had secured an internship at Meridian Marketing, a mid-sized agency with impressive clients. The internship turned into a job offer upon graduation, a moment of validation I had craved for years. When I called home with the news, my father's first question was about the starting salary, followed by, "Well, it's not what Amanda made starting out, but it's a foot in the door." I learned to celebrate my victories with friends instead of family. My first apartment in Chicago was small but mine, a studio in Wicker Park with uneven floors and temperamental plumbing. It was freedom. I gradually reduced contact with my family, calling home every few weeks instead of daily. The emotional distance felt necessary for my well-being. At Meridian, I found the recognition I'd always sought. My direct supervisor, Mark, appreciated my design aesthetic and attention to detail. I formed genuine friendships with co-workers Jessica, a copywriter with a biting sense of humor, and Michael, a fellow designer who became my lunch buddy and occasional weekend museum companion. For the first time, I felt I belonged somewhere. The company culture rewarded creativity and hard work rather than family connections or political maneuvering. I began to build a life that felt authentically mine, separate from the shadow of my sister or the apathy of my parents. I didn't realize then how much Amanda would resent this independence, or how far she would go to undermine it. By my second year at Meridian Marketing, I had established myself as a reliable and innovative designer. What had started as basic layout work evolved into conceptual design for smaller clients, and my ideas were beginning to get noticed. In our weekly creative meetings, even senior team members would nod approvingly when I presented concepts. Rebecca Wilson, the creative director, took a particular interest in my development. A 40-something design veteran with impeccable taste and a no-nonsense demeanor, she began inviting me to sit in on client meetings, something unusual for someone at my level. "You have good instincts, Natalie," she told me after I'd contributed a key insight during a brainstorming session. "And you're not afraid to speak up when you have something valuable to add. That's rare in junior designers." Her mentorship accelerated my growth. Under Rebecca's guidance, I developed campaigns for local businesses that exceeded client expectations. My confidence grew with each successful project, and whispers of a potential promotion began circulating. Mark hinted that I might be moved up to senior designer by year's end, a leap that typically took at least 3 years. The true game-changer came when Rebecca signed me to the Blue Wave Technologies account. Blue Wave was launching a revolutionary healthcare app, and they wanted a complete visual identity overhaul. The budget was substantial, and the exposure would be national. "This is your chance to really shine," Rebecca told me. "I'm giving you lead on the visual concepts. Don't make me regret it." I threw myself into the project, working evenings and weekends to develop something truly innovative. The pressure was intense, but exhilarating. After 3 weeks of development, we were scheduled to present our concepts to Blue Wave's executive team. The presentation was just 5 days away when Amanda called.
Surprise.
"I'm in Chicago for a business conference," she announced. "Let's get dinner tonight." I was hesitant but agreed. It had been nearly 8 months since I'd seen any family, and part of me hoped that our adult relationship might be different from our childhood dynamic. We met at a bistro near my apartment, and I was struck by how polished Amanda looked in her tailored suit and designer accessories. "Business must be good," I commented as we were seated. "Can't complain," she replied with her practiced smile. "Dad says you've been too busy to call home lately." The guilt trip was subtle but familiar. "I've been leading a major project," I said, feeling a spark of pride. "It's for a healthcare tech company that could really boost my career." To my surprise, Amanda seemed genuinely interested, asking detailed questions about the client and the scope of the project. It felt like a breakthrough. My sister actually engaged with my work. When she suggested meeting for drinks the following evening at my office's Friday happy hour, I readily agreed. The office happy hour was a monthly tradition at Meridian, with the conference room transformed by string lights and a well-stocked bar cart. I introduced Amanda to my colleagues, feeling a strange mix of pride and nervousness. She charmed everyone, especially Mark, who spent nearly an hour discussing marketing trends with her. "Your sister is incredibly knowledgeable," Jessica commented as we refilled our drinks. "What does she do again?" "She's in financial services," I replied, watching Amanda network effortlessly across the room. "Always has been the business brain of the family." As the evening wound down, Amanda asked to see my office. Most of the staff had already left, and in my slightly tipsy state, I thought nothing of showing her around. I proudly displayed the Blue Wave materials spread across my desk. "This is impressive, Nat," she said, examining my designs with apparent admiration. "You've really found your calling." When I stepped out briefly to say goodbye to departing colleagues, Amanda mentioned she would use the restroom before we left. We parted ways outside the building 20 minutes later with promises to meet again before she returned to Michigan. The weekend passed in a blur of finalization work on the presentation. Amanda texted that her conference schedule had become hectic, so we wouldn't be able to meet again. I was disappointed, but focused on the Monday presentation. When Monday arrived, I felt prepared and confident. The Blue Wave executives filed into our conference room, and Rebecca nodded for me to begin. I connected my laptop, launched the presentation, and felt the blood drain from my face. The opening slides were as I had designed them, but as I clicked further, I discovered that key visuals had been altered. Professional medical imagery had been replaced with inappropriate stock photos that completely undermined the serious tone we developed. One slide intended to show patient care instead displayed models in suggestive poses. The room grew tense. Rebecca stepped in, apologizing profusely and attempting to salvage the meeting, but the damage was done. The Blue Wave CEO stood up, his expression cold. "This is completely unacceptable. We trusted Meridian with our brand, and this is either gross incompetence or some kind of twisted joke." They walked out despite Rebecca's pleas for another chance. As soon as the door closed, all eyes turned to me. "What the hell was that?" Rebecca demanded, her face flushed with anger. "I don't know," I stammered, frantically clicking through the presentation. "These are my files. Someone must have changed them." An emergency meeting was called with the IT department. They confirmed that the files had been modified Friday evening from my computer, using my login credentials, which had not been logged out. Security footage was reviewed, but the camera angle didn't clearly show who was at my desk during the critical time frame. By Tuesday morning, Blue Wave had officially terminated their contract with Meridian, a loss of over $400,000. By Tuesday afternoon, I was called into a meeting with Rebecca, Mark, and Diane from Human Resources. "We've never had an incident like this," Diane said, sliding a termination letter across the table. "The evidence points to serious misconduct or negligence on your part." "But I didn't do this," I protested, tears welling in my eyes. "Someone must have accessed my computer when I wasn't there. Your credentials were used, and you were responsible for the final review of all materials," Rebecca said, her earlier mentorship replaced by cold professionalism. "We can't afford this kind of mistake." I was escorted to my desk to collect personal items, then walked out of the building by security. The humiliation was crushing. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, clutching a box of desk plants and framed certificates, my phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. "Heading back to Michigan. Sorry we couldn't connect again. Good luck with your big presentation." That's when the pieces fell into place. The timing, the questions about my project, her presence at the office after hours, it all pointed to one unthinkable conclusion. My own sister had sabotaged my career. The days following my termination blurred together in a haze of shock and disbelief. I kept replaying the events in my mind, trying to find an alternative explanation, something that would make more sense than my own sister deliberately destroying my career. But there was none. I called Amanda the day after receiving her text, my hands shaking with anger and confusion. She answered cheerfully, as if nothing had happened. "Amanda, did you change my presentation files when you were at the office Friday night?" A pause. "What are you talking about, Natalie? Is everything okay?" "No, everything is not okay. I was fired because someone altered my files with inappropriate content. It happened Friday night, after the happy hour, when you were there." "Are you seriously accusing me? That's ridiculous. Maybe you made a mistake and don't want to admit it." Her voice hardened. "Or maybe someone else at your office doesn't like you as much as you thought. The security footage shows someone at my desk when I was saying goodbye to coworkers, right after I showed you my office." "Well, it wasn't me. I can't believe you would even think that." Her voice cracked with what sounded like genuine hurt. "I have to go. Call me when you're thinking clearly." She hung up, leaving me more confused than ever. Was I wrong? Had I jumped to conclusions based on coincidence and sibling history? I called my parents that evening, desperate for support or at least a sounding board. My father answered, and I could hear the TV in the background as I explained what had happened. "That sounds terrible, but I'm sure Amanda had nothing to do with it," he said immediately. "She was there for a financial services conference. Why would she risk her own reputation to mess with your work?" "I don't know, Dad. But the timing—" "Natalie," he interrupted, his tone shifting to the one he used for life lessons. "Sometimes in our careers, we make mistakes. The important thing is to learn from them and move on. Playing the blame game won't help you find another job." My mother got on the line, echoing the same sentiment. "Amanda said you seemed stressed when she saw you. Maybe you've been working too hard and missed something important in your files." They had already spoken to Amanda. Of course they had. And they had already decided I was making excuses for my own failure. Financial reality hit hard and fast. Chicago rent wasn't forgiving, and my modest savings would cover only 2 months of expenses. I applied for unemployment benefits while sending out dozens of job applications, but the design community in Chicago was tight-knit. Word of the Blue Wave disaster had spread, and no one was calling back. By the 3rd week, I began selling furniture to make rent. By the 6th week, I was interviewing for retail positions that had nothing to do with design. By the 2nd month, an eviction notice appeared on my door when I couldn't pull together the full rent amount. Throughout this downward spiral, Jessica was the only person from Meridian who maintained contact. She met me for coffee, helped me revise my resume, and offered her couch when I finally had to leave my apartment. "I know you didn't mess up that presentation," she said one evening as we split a pizza in her living room. "It doesn't make sense with everything I know about you." Her belief in me was a lifeline, but it didn't change my circumstances. I was jobless, nearly homeless, and still battling the crushing weight of betrayal. 3 weeks into my stay on Jessica's couch, she came home with information that confirmed my worst suspicions. "I had drinks with Tim from IT last night," she said, dropping her bag by the door. "He's been reviewing the security footage from that Friday more carefully, and he found something." She pulled out her phone and showed me a still image from the security camera. It was grainy but clear enough. Amanda sitting at my desk, my computer screen glowing in front of her. "Tim says this was taken at 8:47 p.m., well after you thought she'd left for the bathroom. She was at your computer for almost 15 minutes. The confirmation should have brought relief, validation that I wasn't crazy or incompetent. Instead, it unleashed a wave of grief, so profound I couldn't speak. My own sister had deliberately destroyed something I had worked so hard to build. I called Amanda again, this time with evidence in hand. When I described the security footage, her denial morphed into defensive anger. "Fine. Maybe I looked at your computer. I was curious about your work. That doesn't mean I sabotaged anything. Amanda, you were there for 15 minutes. The files were changed during exactly that time period." A long silence. Then, "You've always been jealous of me, Natalie. Always trying to make me look bad to feel better about yourself. I'm not having this conversation." She hung up. I called back repeatedly, but she didn't answer. When I tried my parents, my father was coldly dismissive. "Amanda is very upset about your accusations. She says you've been hostile toward her success for years, and now you're trying to blame her for your professional problems. I thought you were more mature than this, Natalie." "Dad, there's actual evidence. Enough. Your mother, and I don't want to be in the middle of this. Figure it out with your sister or move on, but stop trying to drag the family into your drama." The call ended with my father suggesting I look into more stable career options since the art thing doesn't seem to be working out. There was no offer of help, financial or otherwise. Just judgment and dismissal. Jessica's generosity had limits, as did her one-bedroom apartment. After 6 weeks, the strain began to show in our friendship. I found a room in a shared apartment with 3 strangers in a far less desirable neighborhood, paying rent through a combination of retail shifts, food delivery gigs, and the occasional freelance design job. My 27th birthday arrived during this period, marking one of the lowest points of my life. I spent the evening alone in my bedroom, surrounded by strangers' voices through thin walls, eating supermarket cake and scrolling through social media. Amanda had recently posted photos of her promotion celebration, with my parents beaming beside her. I closed the laptop and stared at the ceiling, tears sliding into my hair. I had lost my career, my home, my family's support, and any sense of security I had built. The injustice of it burned like acid. That night, something shifted inside me. The grief and shock that had paralyzed me began to harden into resolve. If my family wouldn't acknowledge the truth, if the industry had temporarily closed its doors to me, I would have to create a new path forward. Alone. I opened my laptop again, but instead of social media, I navigated to online courses in UX design and digital marketing. I created profiles on freelance platforms. I drafted a blog about design trends to rebuild my professional voice. The path ahead was unclear and frightening, but one thing was certain. I would rebuild my life without looking back. And when I succeeded, because I would succeed, my family would not be part of that success. Rebuilding from nothing requires a special kind of stubbornness. Each morning, I forced myself out of bed in my cramped room, opened my laptop, and divided my day between job hunting, skill building, and pitching for freelance work. The rejections were constant at first. My portfolio was strong, but the gap in employment and lack of references raised red flags for potential employers. I started small, almost embarrassingly so. My first freelance job was designing a logo for a dog walking service for $30. The client requested 7 revisions and still seemed unsatisfied with the result. But it was $30 I didn't have before, and more importantly, it was a tiny step forward. Between retail shifts at a bookstore, I took online courses in the latest design software and UX principles. I built a new portfolio website from scratch, carefully omitting any mention of Meridian or the circumstances of my departure. Instead, I focused on showcasing my aesthetic and approach through small projects and conceptual work. 3 months into this grind, I had saved enough to move from the shared apartment to a tiny studio of my own. It was barely 400 square feet in a less-than-ideal neighborhood, with pipes that clanged all night and windows that leaked cold air in winter. But it was mine, a space where I could work without interruption or explanation. The turning point came unexpectedly. A local nonprofit called Greenlight Initiative needed promotional materials for their annual fundraiser, but had virtually no budget. Jessica, who volunteered there occasionally, connected me with them. "They can't pay much," she warned, "but they're good people doing important work, and they'll give you creative freedom." I met with their director, Sophia, who was refreshingly straightforward about their limitations and needs. "We can offer $500 for the entire campaign, print materials, social media graphics, and presentation templates. I know it's not market rate, but we'll credit you prominently and connect you with our network." It wasn't enough to cover even a week's expenses, but something about Sophia's mission and candor resonated with me. I agreed to the project and threw myself into it with an intensity that surprised even me. I created a visual identity for their fundraiser that captured the urgency of their environmental work while conveying optimism and action. The event was more successful than anticipated, raising nearly double their previous year's total. Sophia was effusive in her praise and true to her word about connections. She introduced me to several board members, including Kyle Anderson, a tech entrepreneur who had recently launched a healthcare startup called Wellspring. "Your work for Greenlight caught my attention," Kyle said when we met for coffee. "It's distinctive, clean, but with personality. That's exactly what we're looking for at Wellspring." Kyle explained that his company had developed an app to connect patients with mental health resources, and they needed a complete visual identity before their public launch. The project would start as contract work, but could evolve if things went well. "I should be upfront," I said, steeling myself. I had an issue at my last full-time position that might come up in a background check. A presentation was altered without my knowledge, but I was held responsible. I watched his face carefully, expecting the interest to fade. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. "I appreciate your honesty. Look, I've been in tech long enough to know that things aren't always as straightforward as they appear on paper. I'm more interested in what you can do now than what happened then." The Wellspring contract paid enough for me to focus exclusively on their project for 2 months. I created everything from their logo and color scheme to user interface elements and marketing materials. When Kyle saw the comprehensive package, his reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. This isn't just good design, Natalie. This is exactly what Wellspring needs to stand out. You've translated our mission perfectly into visual language. As Wellspring prepared to launch, Kyle approached me with an unexpected offer. We want you to join us permanently, not as a contractor, but as creative director with equity in the company. You'd build and lead a design team as we grow. The salary he proposed was double what I'd made at Meridian, and the equity stake, though small, represented real investment in the company's future. More importantly, it represented trust in my abilities and judgment. Why me? I asked, still conditioned to expect the worst. You could hire someone with more experience, someone without complications in their background. Kyle's response was simple. Because you think differently. You've faced adversity and found creative solutions. That's exactly the mindset we need. I accepted the position, and the next 18 months were a whirlwind of growth and challenges. Wellspring's app received positive coverage in tech publications, with several specifically mentioning the intuitive design and visual appeal. We secured first-round funding 6 months after launch, then a much larger second round a year later when user numbers exceeded projections. I built a team of 5 designers, carefully selecting people with both technical skills and collaborative mindsets. We developed a distinctive visual language for Wellspring that became recognized within the healthcare tech space. As the company grew, so did my confidence and financial security. I moved from the tiny studio to a spacious loft in a converted warehouse, with high ceilings and natural light that transformed my personal design work. I established genuine friendships with Kyle and several colleagues, relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or history. Throughout this period, I maintained minimal contact with my family. Occasional text exchanges with my mother, brief calls on holidays, nothing more. They knew I was working in tech design, but little else about my life. I had stopped checking Amanda's social media or asking about her during the rare conversations with my parents. Then came the feature in Innovation Quarterly, a respected business and technology magazine. Wellspring was profiled as one of the startups to watch, with a sidebar interview of key team members, including me. The article included my photo and a brief overview of my role in shaping the company's visual identity and user experience. 3 days after the magazine hit newsstands, my phone rang with my father's number. It had been nearly 7 months since our last conversation. I let it go to voicemail, then listened with a strange detachment.
Natalie, it's Dad.
Mom and I saw the article about your company. Looks like things are going well for you. Give us a call when you can. It would be nice to catch up. His tone was casual, as if the estrangement of the past 2 years was a minor scheduling conflict rather than a profound breach of trust and support. I didn't call back immediately, unsure of what I wanted from any reconnection. 2 days later, my mother called. Her message was warmer, but similarly detached from our history. Honey, we're so proud to see you doing well. Everyone here is talking about the article. Amanda mentioned she'd love to hear from you too. We miss you. The mention of Amanda sent a chill through me. After almost 2 years of rebuilding my life from the ashes she had created, hearing her name still triggered a visceral response. A week passed before I returned their calls, agreeing to visit during the upcoming holiday weekend. As I booked the flight to Michigan, I felt neither excitement nor dread, just a muted curiosity about what they wanted from me now that I had something they might value. The flight to Michigan gave me time to prepare mentally, though nothing could fully ready me for facing Amanda again. I had rehearsed possible conversations in my head, imagining everything from tearful apologies to cold denials. What I hadn't prepared for was the surreal normalcy that greeted me at my parents' home. My mother hugged me at the door as if I'd been gone for a weekend rather than years. You look wonderful, honey. Success agrees with you. My father offered an awkward side hug and a comment about my fancy city clothes. The house looked the same, the faded floral couch, the wall of family photos chronicling mostly Amanda's achievements, the slight musty smell from the basement that never quite went away. Amanda arrived 30 minutes after me, making an entrance in designer clothes and expertly applied makeup. She embraced me with practiced warmth. "Look at you, Nat, the tech executive." Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "We have so much catching up to do." I maintained a pleasant facade throughout dinner, answering questions about Wellspring and life in Chicago with carefully edited responses. No one mentioned the past, not my firing, not the evidence of Amanda's sabotage, not the 2 years of silence. It was as if we were performing in a play about a normal family, following a script that excluded any meaningful truth. My mother served her traditional apple pie for dessert, making a show of remembering it was my favorite. As coffee was poured, my father cleared his throat with the same sound he used to make before serious discussions when we were children. "Natalie, we're all very proud of what you've accomplished." He glanced at Amanda, who nodded encouragingly. "It's wonderful to see you landing on your feet after that unpleasantness at your old job." The deliberate vagueness made my skin crawl. "You mean after I was fired because someone sabotaged my work?" I kept my voice even, watching Amanda's face for any reaction. Her expression remained pleasantly neutral. My father waved his hand dismissively. "Water under the bridge now. The important thing is you've done well for yourself." "Very well, from what we understand." "The company you work for received quite a lot of investment money," Amanda added, her tone casual but her eyes sharp. $50 million in the last round, wasn't it? So they had done their research. Not just read the article, but looked into Wellspring's financials. "The company has been successful, yes," I replied carefully. "And you have equity," my mother said. "Not quite a question. That's like owning part of the company, right?" The direction of the conversation was becoming clear, but I waited, curious to see how they would frame their request. My father set down his coffee cup with finality. "Natalie, we wanted to talk to you about some family matters. Financial matters." Here it was. "Your mother and I are in a bit of a situation with the house. The mortgage is underwater after we took out a second loan to help Amanda with her business venture last year." Amanda looked down at her plate. "My investment firm hit some unexpected challenges. The market shifted and we had significant losses. We put everything into supporting her company," my mother added. "It was going so well at first," my father continued, "and then Ethan had his accident 3 months ago. Motorcycle crash. He's okay now, but the medical bills." He shook his head grimly. "He didn't have insurance." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, genuinely concerned about my brother. "Is he fully recovered?" "Physically, yes," my mother said. "But financially, he's devastated." "We all are." The silence that followed was heavy with expectation. Finally, my father spoke again, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he used when he believed he was being perfectly reasonable. "We've been there for both you and your siblings throughout your lives. Now we're asking for your help in return. Your position at this successful company puts you in a unique position to assist your family." Amanda finally looked up, her expression a careful blend of humility and expectation. "We're not asking for charity, Nat. Just family helping family through a rough patch." "How much are you asking for?" I kept my voice neutral, though my heart was racing. My father named a sum that made me blink, nearly a third of my total compensation package for the year, including the value of my equity, which wasn't even liquid yet. "That's substantial," I managed. "Well, we have substantial problems," Amanda replied, a edge creeping into her voice. "Not all of us landed cushy tech jobs with stock." I barely slept that night, my mind constantly cycling through memories and possibilities. By dawn, I was sitting at the small desk in my hotel room, making notes and organizing my thoughts. This wasn't just about money, it was about patterns established over decades, about accountability and growth, about what family should mean. I called Kyle around 8, needing both his business perspective and personal support. "They're asking for money?" he said, disbelief evident in his voice after I explained the situation. "The same sister who sabotaged your career and the parents who didn't believe you." "That's the simplified version, yes. And you're considering it?" His tone wasn't judgmental, just curious. "Not in the way they're asking," I clarified. but I am thinking about how to address the larger issues. Kyle was silent for a moment. You know, in business, we sometimes encounter situations where the obvious solution isn't the right one. The easy path, writing a check or walking away completely, might resolve the immediate tension but not the underlying problem. His words resonated with something forming in my mind.
Exactly.
This isn't just about financial need, it's about patterns and accountability. So, what are you thinking? I outlined my emerging plan. Kyle listened carefully, offering refinements and raising practical considerations I hadn't fully addressed. By the end of our hour-long call, I had a clearer vision of how to proceed. It's unorthodox, Kyle admitted, but it has integrity. Do you want me there when you present this to them? The offer touched me deeply. You'd do that? Of course. Sometimes having an outside witness changes the dynamic. Plus, I've got your back. After hanging up with Kyle, I made another important call to Dr. Eleanor Reynolds, the therapist I had started seeing 6 months after losing my job. She had helped me process the betrayal and rebuild my sense of self-worth during the darkest period. This is a significant boundary moment, Dr. Reynolds noted after hearing the situation. How are you feeling about confronting them directly? Nervous but resolved, I admitted. I keep imagining them dismissing everything I say, the way they always have. That's a valid concern based on your history with them. What would help you feel more grounded during this conversation? We spent 30 minutes discussing strategies for maintaining my center if the conversation became defensive or manipulative. Dr. Reynolds reminded me that I couldn't control their reactions, only my own responses and boundaries. Remember, Natalie, you're not the same person who left Michigan 2 years ago. You've developed strength and clarity that will serve you well here. My next call was to Rebecca, my former mentor at Meridian. We had reconnected about 8 months earlier after she reached out with an apology. Once Jessica showed her the security footage evidence, Rebecca had realized the terrible mistake in firing me, but by then I was established at Wellspring and not interested in returning. Our relationship had evolved into an occasional professional friendship, with Rebecca offering industry insights and me sharing my experiences building a design team from scratch. Family financial demands, she sighed after I explained. I've been there. My brother expected me to bankroll his series of failed restaurants because I was the successful one. How did you handle it? Poorly at first, she admitted with a rueful laugh. I wrote checks until I resented him, then cut him off completely until he wouldn't speak to me. It took years to find a healthier middle ground. Her perspective was valuable. She had lived through different approaches to a similar problem and could speak to the long-term consequences. If I could go back, she said thoughtfully, I would have set clearer expectations from the beginning. Financial help with strings attached isn't really help, it's control. But no boundaries at all isn't healthy either. By early afternoon, I had done enough consultation and reflection. I researched financial counseling services in Michigan, job placement programs in the Lansing area, and educational grant opportunities. I spoke with a lawyer friend about protecting my assets while still offering meaningful assistance to family members. I then called my father and proposed a family meeting the following day at my hotel's conference room. I'd like to discuss my response to your financial request in a neutral setting, I explained. I'll have a colleague with me, and I'd appreciate if everyone could attend you, Mom, Amanda, and Ethan if possible. A colleague? My father questioned, sounding confused. This is a private family matter, Natalie. I understand, but my response involves some business considerations that Kyle can help explain. It wasn't entirely true, but it provided a reasonable explanation for Kyle's presence. My father reluctantly agreed, though I could hear the disapproval in his voice. Ethan confirmed separately that he would attend, sounding subdued but grateful for the invitation. It's good to hear from you, Nat, he said quietly. I've missed you. That evening, I prepared a simple presentation outlining my proposal. I rehearsed what I would say, anticipating objections and emotional reactions. I reviewed my notes from Dr. Reynolds about staying grounded in the face of potential manipulation or dismissal. Kyle arrived the next morning, bringing a steadying presence and professional demeanor to what promised to be an emotionally charged encounter. We set up the small conference room with water pitchers, notepads, and copies of the materials I had prepared. "Ready?" Kyle asked as the meeting time approached. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange calm. "Ready. Whatever happens, this is the right path forward." My family arrived together, their expressions ranging from my father's barely concealed impatience to Ethan's genuine curiosity. Amanda looked polished as always, but I noticed the tension around her eyes. She had the most at stake in how this conversation unfolded. As they took their seats around the conference table, I stood at the head, ready to take control of a family dynamic that had controlled me for far too long. The conference room felt both too small and too large as my family settled into their seats. My father immediately took a power position directly across from me, while my mother sat beside him, hands nervously adjusting her purse strap. Amanda chose a seat that kept her partially in shadow, and Ethan, looking thinner than I remembered, sat closest to me, offering a small smile of encouragement. Kyle positioned himself slightly behind me, his presence professional but supportive. I had asked him to remain mostly silent unless directly addressed, wanting this to be clearly my conversation to lead. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "I appreciate you taking the time to meet in this setting. Seems unnecessarily formal," my father commented, glancing around the conference room with disapproval. "And I'm not sure why an outsider needs to be involved in family business. Kyle is here at my request, both as a witness and for professional support," I explained calmly. "What we're discussing today involves significant financial decisions that affect my professional future as well as our family relationships." I distributed folders containing the materials I had prepared. "Before we discuss any financial assistance, there's something we need to address directly." I turned toward Amanda, meeting her gaze directly for the first time in years. "The reason I lost my position at Meridian Marketing." Amanda's posture stiffened immediately. "I thought this meeting was about helping the family financially, not dredging up ancient history." "The two are connected," I replied. 2 years ago, I was fired after someone altered my presentation files with inappropriate content before a major client meeting. That someone was you, Amanda." My father started to interrupt, but I held up my hand. "Please let me finish. I have evidence." I connected my laptop to the room's display screen and played the security footage Jessica had obtained, showing Amanda clearly at my computer after hours. This footage was captured at exactly the time the files were modified, using my login credentials, which were still active on my workstation. The room fell silent as the grainy but unmistakable evidence played. Amanda's face drained of color, while my parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. "I don't understand," my mother finally said, her voice small. "Amanda, is this true?" Amanda's defense was immediate and practiced. "That video just shows me using Natalie's computer. Maybe I was checking email or something. It doesn't prove I changed any files. The system logs show the exact files were modified during that 15-minute period," I countered. "No one else accessed those files between my final save earlier that day and the presentation the following morning." "Why would she do such a thing?" my father asked, but his tone had shifted from dismissal to uncertainty. I looked directly at Amanda. "That's a question I've been asking myself for 2 years. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Ethan unexpectedly spoke up. "Amanda told me about it," he said quietly, not meeting anyone's eyes. "About 6 months ago, when she was drunk after losing that big client. She said she'd put Natalie in her place once, and that it had gone too far." Amanda's head snapped toward Ethan. "You're taking her side? After everything I've done for you?" "I'm not taking sides," Ethan replied, finally looking up. "I'm just tired of pretending. We all know who you are, Amanda. We've all been walking on eggshells around you our whole lives." My mother pressed her fingers to her temples. "I don't understand why any of this is happening. We're supposed to be discussing financial help." "That's exactly what we're discussing," I said firmly. "But real help requires honesty about how we got here." I turned back to Amanda. "I don't expect a full confession today, but I do need acknowledgement of what happened before we can move forward in any capacity." Amanda's composure cracked slightly, her carefully maintained facade showing fissures.
Fine.
I looked at your files. Maybe I made some changes. I didn't think it would get you fired, just embarrassed enough to come home where you belonged instead of thinking you were better than the rest of us. It wasn't a complete admission, but it was more than I had expected. My father looked stunned, while my mother seemed to physically shrink in her chair. Thank you for that partial honesty, I said, keeping my voice level despite the emotion rising in my throat. What happened afterward is important too. When I lost my job, my apartment, and nearly everything I had built, I reached out to this family for support. Instead, I was told I was making excuses for my failure. My father shifted uncomfortably. We didn't know. You chose not to know, I corrected him. You chose not to even consider that I might be telling the truth if it meant acknowledging Amanda might be in the wrong. The harsh truth hung in the air. No one contested it. Despite all that, I rebuilt my life. Without family support, without industry connections, without anything but my own determination and the kindness of the few friends who stood by me. I clicked to the next slide in my presentation, showing the structure of what I was proposing. Now you've asked for my financial help. I've given this considerable thought, and here's my response. I will not be giving you the money you requested. My father's face darkened, but I continued before he could object. Instead, I'm offering something more valuable, a pathway to sustainable financial independence for each of you, with my support. I outlined the comprehensive package I had developed. For Ethan, I've arranged for job placement assistance with 3 companies in Chicago that work with musicians in marketing and production. I'll cover relocation costs and 3 months of rent while you establish yourself. For Mom and Dad, I've enrolled you in a financial recovery program that includes debt consolidation options and mortgage restructuring. I'll cover the consultation fees and contribute to the initial payment to prevent foreclosure on the condition that you complete the full financial literacy course. For Amanda, I've secured a spot in a business mentorship program through Kyle's network. It includes career counseling and placement services with firms looking for someone with your qualifications. Additionally, I'm offering to pay for 6 months of therapy sessions for you to address the competitive dynamics that led to your actions. For all of us, I'm establishing a family educational fund that can be accessed for specific skill development or career advancement. The fund will be managed by a third party with clear guidelines for how it can be used. I clicked to the final slide, showing the total value of this package, slightly more than what they had originally requested, but structured entirely differently. This approach addresses the root causes of the financial issues rather than temporarily patching over them with cash that would likely be gone within months. The silence that followed was profound. My father was the first to break it, his face flushed with what looked like a mixture of anger and embarrassment. So, instead of helping your family in the way we asked, you're offering us charity with strings attached. No, I replied calmly. I'm offering investment in your futures rather than a bailout of your past. There's a crucial difference. Amanda stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is just your way of controlling us and making yourself feel superior. Classic Natalie. Always thinking you know better than everyone else. I had anticipated this reaction. You're welcome to decline any part of this offer. It's entirely your choice. Some choice, she scoffed. Jump through your hoops or get nothing. Amanda, Kyle spoke for the first time, his voice measured and professional. As someone who works with investment structures daily, I can tell you that what Natalie is offering is actually quite generous and thoughtfully designed. It's how smart investors help businesses in trouble, by addressing fundamental issues rather than just providing cash infusions. My mother, who had been silent throughout most of the meeting, finally spoke up. I think we should consider it, Richard, she said to my father. What we've been doing hasn't been working. I'm in, Ethan said without hesitation. I've been stuck in a rut here, and this could be the fresh start I need. My father looked torn between his pride and the practical reality of their situation. We need time to discuss this privately, he finally said. Of course, I agreed. Take whatever time you need. The offer will remain open for 30 days, after which we can reassess if necessary. As they prepared to leave, I added one final point. Regardless of your decision about this financial assistance, I want to be clear about something else. My relationship with each of you moving forward will depend on honest acknowledgement of the past and respect for my boundaries. I'm open to rebuilding those relationships, but not at the expense of my self-respect or emotional well-being. Amanda left without another word, but my parents lingered awkwardly by the door. My mother surprised me by stepping forward and embracing me tentatively. "I'm sorry we didn't listen," she whispered. "I think I always knew, deep down." My father simply nodded, unable to find words but making eye contact in a way that suggested the beginning of recognition. Ethan was the last to leave, giving me a genuine hug. "I've missed you, sis. And for what it's worth, I always believed you." After they left, Kyle and I sat in the empty conference room, the emotional weight of the confrontation settling around us. "You did well," he said simply. "That couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't," I admitted, "but it was necessary." 6 months later, the landscape of my family relationships had shifted dramatically. Ethan had taken the opportunity one offered and moved to Chicago, where he was thriving at a music production company. We had dinner weekly, rebuilding our sibling bond with adult honesty. My parents had reluctantly but eventually fully participated in the financial recovery program. Their home was now on more stable footing, and our conversations had evolved to include occasional acknowledgments of past patterns they were working to change. Amanda's path was more complicated. She initially rejected my offer entirely, but 3 months later, when another business venture collapsed, she reluctantly reached out. She was now working with a career counselor and had started therapy, though our personal relationship remained distant and cautious. Small steps of accountability had begun to emerge in her communications, not quite apologies, but admissions that revealed growing self-awareness. As for me, the process of standing firm in my boundaries while offering constructive support had been healing in ways I hadn't anticipated. I had confronted my deepest family wounds without either capitulating to old patterns or cutting ties completely. The experience reinforced what I had learned through rebuilding my career. True strength isn't about never falling or never helping others. It's about rising with integrity and helping in ways that foster growth rather than dependency. The money I might have given as a simple handout had instead become an investment in change for all of us. It wasn't a perfect resolution, and the journey of family healing would likely continue for years. But for the first time, that journey was based on truth rather than pretense, on mutual respect rather than exploitation. As I reflected on the transformation, I realized that the title of this chapter in my life wasn't really about my sister getting me fired or my family demanding money. It was about finding my voice and using it to break cycles that had damaged us all for generations. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who hurt you? What would you have done in my situation? Given the money, walked away completely, or tried a different approach? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more stories about overcoming family challenges and building healthy boundaries. Remember, sometimes the most loving thing we can do for others isn't giving them what they ask for, but offering what they truly need. Thank you for joining me on this journey.